But I really don't have any regrets. I really don't. I've lived exactly how I've wanted to. I've tried my hardest every single time. I didn't win the matches that maybe I should have always won, but I really gave it my all. So that for me is enough.
Hi everybody, welcome back to The Body Serve. I'm James.
I'm Jonathan.
This is episode 116. I'm running out of things to go along with the numbers. Like, there's no significance to 116, right?
There was really only 112.
Right. So we're still in Toronto together, but Jonathan will be leaving for Charleston in a few days, and I'm going to be stuck here in cold, miserable Toronto.
You'll be going home for Easter.
I will, which will be really fun. Now, we are going to be a little bit previous and record together while we still can, but the episode is going to be coming out a bit later.
So the idea here is to get you and some audio of you so that you can appear on the episode, right?
So you all don't forget me.
Because I'm really not about the life of holding up in a bathroom trying to get some decent audio while we do a Skype call.
Yeah, it's just not going to work. It's not worth it. We're going to preserve your ears.
We solicited listener questions and topic suggestions so that we could answer some of those and then stitch them in along with whatever content comes your way from Charleston.
Mm-hmm. And as usual, you all came through in a big way, asking really great questions and some topic suggestions that alarmed and challenged us, which I think we're going to have to take our time with. Some of these need a little research.
So you're saying you're not going to deal with it just now? Is that what you're saying?
Well, somebody suggested we do a segment about tennis romance gossip, and I'm going to have to do some homework because I don't know what's going on with Nick Kyrgios and Ayla Tomljanovic. Do you? Who can keep up?
I try to stay out of people's business
as
much as possible.
That's such a damn lie.
So for this episode, we're going to do a couple of segments, topic suggestions, based on two kind of salacious, see what happened was situations in Miami. And then on subsequent episodes, we'll deal more with the, the straight up question and answers.
Okay. If you all have been paying attention, if you've been on tennis Twitter, you know that the ATP boys have been acting crazy in Miami. I don't know what the hell is going on down there, but they are just pissy pants. Earlier in the week, we had Medvedev and Tsitsipas go at it. After their match, there was some drama about bathroom breaks and gamesmanship. I don't think it's still not agreed upon what was said by Stefanos as he passed Daniel at the end of the match. But whatever he said elicited a very fiery response from Medvedev. He said he dropped really one of the lines of the year in tennis. Hey, shut your fuck up, man. Which I'm going to be saying forever.
And Stefanos just kept on moving. He just walked right off the court, did not even pay attention to what was being said to him at that point.
Danny did not stop. He went on and on and on. He was really offended by whatever was said. And there's been some conjecture, and I don't really want to give voice to it because I'm not sure if it's true. But Danny even said, I know I'm a bad guy sometimes, but this time, basically, I'm not wrong this time.
And the umpire was like, yeah, we know. That was the first one that happened, but that wasn't the most juicy. That wasn't the one that kept on giving gifts over and over and over again. That wasn't the salty daddy cock fucking...
What? What? I feel that the order in which you put those is really important.
It's the word cloud from what happened.
Okay, so Fernando Verdasco and Thanasi Kokkinakis. What the hell happened? Fernando was upset about a guy in the stands making noise and talking in between his first and second serves. He went up to the umpire and said, you need to throw this guy out. He's really annoying. And Kokkinakis said, who are you talking about? And they go back and forth. Fernando describes him. And he's like, that's my fucking dad, mate. He didn't say mate.
And then Fernando was like, well, oh, sorry, man. It was very conciliatory at that point, but he was still maintaining his position that the dude should not be talking in between points. But it gave the impression that because Fernando accepted that it was Kokkinakis' father, he kind of receded a little bit with his accusation. which to our minds we're like, well, to my mind, I'll speak for myself. I would double down. I'd be like, well, if it is your father, then he should damn well know to behave better.
Exactly. What does it matter if, in fact, it was his father? Like, throw him out then. If the guy is being disruptive, then either discipline him or ask him to leave. This is not unprecedented in tennis. We know that Verdasco is a hothead. We know that Kokkinakis is as well. You remember back in Montreal in 2015, he almost fought Ryan Harrison on court?
Who doesn't remember that?
Yeah, and this was in the midst of the whole Kyrgios-Wawrinka fight that brought up Kokkinakis. But Verdasco maintains, no, he's not your dad. He said it several times, and he still says it on Twitter.
I don't understand what Kokkinakis' position was.
His position was, that's my dad.
And so what?
Period. So shut
he
up.
should be allowed to carry on however he wants?
Yeah, basically.
He wasn't being disrespectful to his father.
He wasn't. I was surprised because Fernando has this reputation of being hot-tempered. He was actually quite reasonable throughout the whole thing. And like you said, he even said, once Tanasi said, this is my dad, he said, oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but this stuff can't happen. Which, to me, is completely reasonable.
It's better than you would have handled it.
It sure would be. I would have said, I really don't give a fuck if it's your dad. He needs to leave.
So all this is going on. I don't quite know the full, precise timeline, nor do I really care to find out. After this happened, when Nick Kyrgios got involved, people are like, well, when did he delete the tweet? I'm like, does it matter?
I mean...
What did Kyrgios tweet?
He said, quote, I hope TK wins this match. Verdasco is the saltiest dude. Must be frustrated at his past success against Aussies. Apparently Verdasco has lost his last 6 matches against Aussies. Before this, of course, because he beat Kokkinakis.
I think it was even 7, maybe.
Oh, okay.
But the point, where is Nick going with this? Well, this is totally unnecessary.
Nick just cannot help it. He has to profile as being this hard, tough dude. He always chimes in defense of Kokkinakis, and I've never really seen it in reverse.
Is it always in defense? It seems to me that he threw Kokkinakis under the bus when it came to that match against Stan.
Well, that's true.
Like, is this just making up for that still? Kokkinakis never seemed to hold it against him.
No, I mean, they're still mates. They're obviously good bros. But why? Like, why do you have to chime in? And Nick is obviously a very complicated figure. Some of you might remember me being sort of enamored of him when I first saw him in person because he's so charismatic in press and he's so engaging. But for me, it's like, why? You remind us over and over that you're this really good guy and you do good things and you go out of your way to hang out with the kids from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, to hit with them before your match. Why do you engage in this childish bullshit when you're constantly trying to repair your image? Like, you're reminding us that I'm really a good guy, I'm not a bad guy. Okay, we get it. Just be a good guy. Like,
I think you're thinking that that's way more calculated than it is. I think he just does what he feels he wants to do. And part of that is doing these things which we moralize as good. And as you said, like trying to be a PR move. Like, does Nick even have a PR manager? I saw somebody say that today, that his PR manager must be pissed. Like, who is even in Nick's camp?
No,
he just does what he wants. And sometimes that's great. Sometimes that's childish. People say all the time in defense of some of the stuff that he does that's awry and misses the mark, that, oh no, he's just a young kid. The part of that rings true for me is the childishness with which some of these social media things spring up. We are way too old to understand what it's like to grow up with like Snapchat when it was coming out. Like, we are Facebook
like
babies.
we weren't tweens when using Snapchat, right? I think, but Nick obviously cares a lot about how people see him. Like, he's a sensitive dude. He is trying to remind us that he is a good guy. Like, that's coming straight from him. And there's always these sort of insecure, well, if that had been me, I would have been banned for 5 years and da-da-da-da. Like, he is invested in people thinking that he is a good person. And I don't think that he's not.
I would argue that that's not so much insecure as it is truth-telling and double standard telling.
Right, but it's like every time. Like, Gavrilova threw her racket engaged in some heinous behavior last month, which we didn't even talk about. And he's like, had that been me...
I'm curious as to why you look at it this way as opposed to if this were somebody else or maybe anybody else, you'd say he's just being real petty, which is like your favorite emotion in the world.
Well, because I wish Nick would just be Nick.
And I'm saying I think this is Nick. And I don't think either of us knows for sure. I think it's all conjecture. The point is that this was totally unnecessary.
It was.
And then if you are going to go that route and call Verdasco out on Twitter like that, don't delete it. Have you not learned anything, even from your own past? Like, that stuff is screenshotted immediately.
Because then you look like a baby.
And even then, these things, even though you might delete it now, it still shows up in people's feeds depending on if...
Yeah, like if they've reloaded or not, right?
Yeah. So the opportunity is always there for it to be captured. It was never going to go away. And you look like a really small person when you delete it. You got to own it.
Because if you've made this your business, like it's not your business, but if you've inserted yourself, just own what you said. So Fernando fired back and said, if you have the courage to tweet insulting somebody, you should have the courage to not delete the tweet.
Which is an adult tweet.
Right.
It's one of those things where, you see, when I read this, I was like, oh my God. This is one of those situations where, and I've experienced it many times in my past, where you have an absolutely valid point, but you go about delivering it the wrong way. And because you've delivered the message the wrong way, you've given the higher ground to the recipient. And there's nothing you can do about that. Like, Fernando may very well be the saltiest dude. He may have done something in the past to piss you off. Your ammunition may be very justified. But because you've done this and deleted it, you've now given Fernando the higher ground to be then saying, you think you're a big dude? Well, why didn't you leave it up?
Right.
And there's no arguing with that, because that's not how these games are played in the adult world.
Yeah. And so there was some sniping back and forth. And then today, Fernando tweeted, just for all of you guys to know, it was not Thanasi's dad. He is still on this. It was not your dad. I died. I thought this whole thing had blown over. Fernando won the match, whatever. No, I just want you to know it was not his dad.
A hilarious piece of commentary from this whole situation. David Kane tweeted, and these are not his words in terms of the hormones, but he said, ATP players are out here talking about WTA players and their hormones, and we know what they mean when they say that, right? Meanwhile, ATP players are like, and there's a gif of some housewives throwing wine in each other's face, right? Because the truth is, they are all messy and petty when they're ready. So for ATP players to be grandstanding that somehow they're A, not petty, or B, less petty, or C, their pettiness is not something that hinders their tennis, is absolutely absurd.
Hun. And then Berdych and Tiafoe last night. Berdych was bitching about every last thing, carrying on like a prima donna, and eventually lost that match today when it was...
I didn't see that one with Tomasz. I just assume that he's a little bit pissy all the time. It's the thing, like, these men are all pissy all the time. And maybe, perhaps now that some of them are no longer experiencing the comforts of their previous high rankings, that, things become a little bit more complicated for them on the outer courts.
Oh, you really came that way.
Perhaps that's what this is all about. And then there was Sam Querrey, who actually was a little bit justified in him being pissed off that Denis Shapovalov was able to take a medical timeout before Sam was to serve to stay in the match at 4-5 in the third set.
And I know how that pains you to admit that Sam Querrey may have been right. But it was a little bit of Victoria Azarenka medical timeout Australian Open.
What was the drama on the women's side?
Oh, well, I'm so glad you asked. Because the Caroline Wozniacki-Monica Puig match attracted all kinds of attention, even from outside of tennis. Caroline lost a very tight and long 3-set match to Monica Puig, who had a lot of vociferous support in Miami, which is to be expected. And man, shit went down. Like, I don't think we even know the extent of what happened in the crowd that night. Caroline, after the match, accused some spectators of threatening her family, wishing death upon her mother and father, calling her names, telling her 10-year-old niece and nephew to sit your ass down and shut the fuck up.
These are things that actually happened. Like, you could see Peter come to her on a coaching changeover, giving her an update as to what's going on, meaning that nothing was being done by the Miami tournament.
And you could see throughout the match Wozniacki asking the umpire to tell him to shut up or get out or whatever, like just handle the situation. And the umpire asked people to be quiet, be respectful, etc. But beyond that, like, you really need to have the cooperation of the tournament and of the security staff, because what can the umpire do? Clear the entire stadium? And it's important to note that she didn't blame Monica in this. She said it was a great, well-thought match, that Monica is a friend, but what she experienced was beyond the pale, really. Is not acceptable in a tennis match.
Caroline's exact words: "Last night I lost a tough match to a great opponent and friend, Monica Puig, at the Miami Open. I am fully aware that tennis is a game of wins and losses. However, during the match last night, people in the crowd threatened my family, wished death upon my mom and dad, called me names that I can't repeat here, and told my fiance's niece and nephew, who are 10 years old, to sit down and shut the fuck up. Meanwhile, security and staff did nothing to prevent this, and even accepted this to take place. While I always encourage fans to cheer for their favorite players, and I thrive on a challenging atmosphere, when certain lines are crossed, it makes tennis miserable for both competitors. I hope the Miami Open chooses to take this seriously, because it's a horrible example to set for the next generation of tennis players and fans. I wish Monica all the best for the rest of the tournament. Love, Caroline."
Well, damn.
There are people out here saying that Caroline is making too much of this, and or don't believe her. How do you get to that position? Like, I don't understand. That somebody goes... You think that Caroline really needs to explain away a loss by going to these lengths? Like, do you really think she cares that much if nothing happened for her to go fabricate this stuff?
Right.
Like, it's really ghastly that people would go there, I think.
She's really not somebody... She's not gone there in the past. I know, she's had her dust-ups with umpires, and she's complained about trivial things, but she's never accused a crowd of things like this.
No.
This is uncharacteristic.
People are conflating her kind of... How do you choose these words wisely?
Right.
Her complaining a lot in matches, be it to the umpire about certain situations, what have you. She's developed this reputation. People are conflating that with something much, much different.
Because, as you said, she's not somebody to make excuses about a loss. She's not someone to make up allegations. She can be salty, but this is unprecedented as far as I know. I can't remember hearing about a situation like this. So the major accusation from Caroline was leveled at the tournament itself.
Which is where it should be.
Mm-hmm. This, of course, elicited a response from the tournament director, James Blake, who said, "The security of the players is our number one priority. Last night's match between Caroline and Monica was played in front of a loud and passionate crowd. While I personally feel that no one should have to endure any sort of abuse on the court, we do our best to provide a safe and fair environment. During the match, we had tournament and WTA staff as well as tournament security courtside. They never witnessed, nor were they notified of any specific threats made to the players or their families. If we had been notified, the situation would have been handled immediately." Well, Caroline's Facebook post refutes this in its entirety. She said that security literally laughed at her family and her entourage when they made these complaints. I mean, it's so inadequate.
And who is security? Is security a volunteer?
Right.
It's hard to tell at these tournaments who is who and doing what job. Caroline's camp would know more than most who specifically to deal with. The bottom line is, for me, is that it's believable that it wasn't dealt with seriously. Because a lot of people working at these events are not trained to be able to deal with a situation like this.
Right. We've all been at sporting events. We've been to tennis tournaments especially. They are not always prepared for that kind of behavior at a tennis tournament. In hockey, sure. the cops haul people out all the time in hockey games, right? But I have seen instances where people should be removed from a tennis tournament, and security is like, well, and this is purely anecdotal. I don't know exactly what happened at Miami.
But also, if you've been to any tennis tournament, you know that it is still entirely possible for somebody to run onto the court and stab a tennis player.
Right.
It's entirely
course.
possible, and it's totally shocking in this day and age that something like that, knock on wood, hasn't happened again.
Yep.
Because the security at these events are absurd.
Terrible.
On one hand, it's one of the beauties of being a fan of professional tennis, in that the players are so accessible. And there is a carefree attitude when you're just minding your own business, and there's a player and a coach brushing right by you, walking through the crowd, and they legitimately don't seem concerned about their safety. You know, getting that type of access is unique and an absolute credit to the sport. By the same token, we know how lax it is getting into the stadium as well.
Entering, my God. You could bring in practically anything.
Entering the site, most events it's run by volunteers, little old ladies and old men, and there's nothing serious about it.
They take the most cursory glance through your bag and send you through the metal detector. Like, why is tournament security so hesitant to eject people? So they've paid for a ticket. There are conditions on that purchase, right? Like, you can't act a damn fool and expect to stay. And the umpire in this match, maybe should have done more, but she is constrained also from where she's sitting. She can maybe help point people out to security, but like, if security's not cooperative, what can she do?
And kudos to Anna Marseille, who found some receipts on Twitter.
Yes.
Pictures of one of the main culprits.
And exposed her. So Twitter is doing its work. I imagine eventually she will be identified if the drive is there, because tennis Twitter is smart.
And listen, if she's behaving like that at a tennis tournament, there is some person that she has pissed off in their life, in her life, that will throw her under the bus.
Our podcast friend Anna Marseille, as you mentioned, did suggest this topic to us, which she called the knee-jerk, tone-deaf, victim-blaming response from James Blake. We just read Blake's official response as Miami tournament director, and it left a lot to be desired, especially as a former player. And it did make me think, what does a tournament director do? Like, what is their role in this situation? We've seen a few tournaments hire former players as kind of high-profile tournament directors. What is his job? His job is, in a big way, public relations and promotion for this tournament, to be the public face for the tournament. And in that sense... It's
a job that he has for a very limited time of the year.
Right. And in that sense, this has to be seen as a total failure. Because the statement doesn't seem to acknowledge the fear that Caroline expressed in her statement.
No, because you could make... Suppose what James is saying is true, or that he believes it to be true, and that's his position. You still need to show way more sympathy for Caroline's position. And I'm wondering, say people were notified and he wasn't made aware that they were notified. Whatever. There should be a contingency plan in place to deal with something like this. If Peter Wozniacki comes and says, like, this person is harassing whatever, blah, 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 fine, maybe it's the customer's always right position that this person needn't be ejected, but you put them somewhere else. Or you kick them out and you say, here's tickets to tomorrow, or something else. Like, find some way to make, and you're shaking your head.
Get them the fuck out of there. If you're acting like that in a movie theater, you'll be ejected and you won't be given a free ticket for tomorrow.
Listen, I understand your position. I agree with you. I'm just saying that if you're intent on placating the situation in a way that's not just totally siding on the side of the fans, then there are ways to go about doing it. And we know that the players are independent contractors, essentially, that they don't have union representation to deal with this kind of stuff, but the WTA is built on the backs of their labor. And so if you're a tournament director, you need to protect that. I don't know. I just don't know how you come away from a situation like this as a tournament director and not have it at least be seen publicly that you treated this seriously.
Right, at least the perception that you treated it seriously. And even if all of those things that Caroline said happened didn't quite happen that way, she perceived it that way. She felt threatened. She felt that her family was threatened. Like, you need to deal with that.
And it's happening mid-match.
Right.
Like, it's obviously affecting her
It's
play.
on TV.
Yeah.
You know?
We are big fans of James Blake, but seriously, do better.
James's statement is written in a very PR, judicious manner. It's very formulaic, and to me, it seems to be pussyfooting around liability, right? We are not taking responsibility for anything. Nothing happened. If it had happened, we would have done something, and that's that on that. It was disappointing because it was so sober.
And it's also not in keeping with his stature in the game now as somebody who is outspoken, who has dealt with injustice, who you would expect a more hands-on approach to actually address the issue.
Right. Is this just him with his tournament director hat on? This is what he believes has to be done? That's what the role calls for? I feel like there is room for a more expansive way of looking at it.
Hey everybody, it's Jonathan, sans James. I'm by myself in Charleston for the body serve, but I've got with me Chad CC Smooth, friend of the podcast, prior guest. He's back again. We've got a silent partner in the audio room as well. Tennis fan Dan is in the car as we record this. He's giving the peace sign. He won't be saying hello. Chad, what's up?
Hey guys, happy Sunday to you from Charleston, South Carolina. The last time I was in this car,
Happy Easter.
happy Easter to everyone in the world. But the last time I was in the car, Jonathan and James were looking at each other in the face and the eyes, and we're doing an amazing job with the podcast. I was sitting in the back seat, totally in awe of that chemistry between the two of them. And now I'm in the front seat for this podcast.
So what you're trying to say is you are trying to all about Eve James? Is that what's going on?
Could never replace James. I could never replace James. I am only here for one weekend in this front seat. So
You're here mostly because you were on the ground, extensively in Miami.
right.
Your Twitter profile kind of jumped off because of it. You had some amazing pictures, one of which was featured on Tennis Channel. Lindsay Davenport gave you a shout out. How awesome was that?
It was very awesome. And I'll get into that in just 1 second. And I forgot to say this, Jonathan. I'm so sorry. But the big news of the day is happy birthday to Vince. I'm sorry. I had to throw it in. I had to do my Vince shout out. But happy, is it 7th?
No, Vince is 11 today.
11. Happy birthday to Vince. But just wanted to throw that in there. But no, the whole Miami experience was cool. I saw the thing on Tennis Channel about the picture of Lindsay Davenport. I didn't hear it until actually after Miami, but she was very complimentary. And so many people on Twitter were as well. And just thought it was great.
What were some of the more exciting moments from Miami that you would share with the listeners from your perspective?
So this is my first time going to the Miami tournament, and I wanted to get it in before they moved from Key Biscayne this year. And for me, the best part of the Miami tournament was seeing the qualies and seeing some of my faves get through, like Michael Moe and Francis. Michael, I think, had his biggest win of his career over RBA, number 15, I think, in the world, in 3 tight sets, 7-6 in the third. Francis had a couple of good wins over Kyle Edmund, over Burdick, which I stayed till 2:15 in the morning to watch the end of that match, but they called it at 5-4 in the third.
You had a Sophie's Choice kind of moment with Mo beating your boy Chris Eubanks.
That was the toughest match for me. I was feeling split all kinds of ways, just sitting there watching the two of them. Chris finally gets a wild card to a nice tournament, a big tournament, and Michael fights his way through qualies, and I was there for every match. His dad even came up to me after the last match and said, "We appreciate that you're here to support us," that Michael really appreciates it. And then later that day, we find out he's playing Chris. And I'm like, fuck. So we go to that match. I see Michael's dad there. I've been rooting for Chris for a minute, and it was just really awkward. So, but that was the worst part of the Miami tournament. But Michael came through and actually had a good tournament after that.
Before we get to the winners, I mean, there's very little to be said about the men's side as far as I am concerned. But we will let you know that John Isner won.
Who is that? Who?
He's tall.
He's tall.
Have you seen him before?
A tall guy.
It was a tall final. He beat Alex Zverev. I'm sounding like Brad Gilbert here. He beat Alex Zverev. I refuse to call him Sasha, just so I can be petty, in the final. And then Sloane Stephens beat Yelena Ostapenko in the final on the women's side. But before we get to that, the Williams sisters. I have a bone to pick with you.
What?
Because I know that you were all around those grounds with that S-Pen tent open, and you didn't bring me one. Where is my S?
Jonathan.
Chad, and I'll have you know, if I had that S right now, it would stand for salty. Just like Fernando Verdasco.
Jonathan, as soon as this is done, I am going to walk over to my car and get you an S Pen out of my trunk.
Oh, you have extra?
I have one just for you and James that
really?
you can share. S is for sharing, and you too. And I bought one for the body serve without the.
See, now I feel like an asshole.
Well, I mean, I was going to surprise you on the podcast, and here you go. But that's okay.
Well, thank you, Chad.
You're welcome. The S is for smooth. So, but no, Serena came. I saw her in practice, and no one was at her practice. It was on the main stadium court. She was having trouble on the practice court, and she didn't seem to be hitting her groove. And I saw her another time before her match, and then as soon as Serena came, she played Naomi, and I didn't see but half that match because that's when Chris and Michael were being played. Did you see any of it?
I was at work. I did not see that match.
Okay.
So this is some reporting we're doing right now.
Well, I did happen to run to the match after the first set, and Serena seemed to be going for more than she usually does. I don't know if that was because she didn't feel like she could match up with Naomi without going for winners. But she was going for broke when I didn't think she had to.
Well, Naomi is coming into that match fresh off of winning Indian Wells, right? The biggest win of her career.
Right.
She looks in incredible shape. Like I saw Naomi in Charleston last year and then in Cincinnati. It's like when a young boy goes through adolescence and then you see him and then he's a man. You know, like she looks like she's a grown woman now compared to even just last year. And I think that kind of physical transformation can only help her game. And Serena is kind of in the opposite direction in terms of fighting her way back into her best physical shape. And so I think if we're to talk about why Serena may have been pressing, I think that's the thing that I've noticed most in her comeback so far, that she isn't able to trust her body in the way that I think Venus trusts her body now, in being able to go and play 3 sets and not having to worry about running out of gas. I feel like the biggest thing for Serena now in her comeback is to get to a point where physically she can trust her game, to not have to press in situations where it's unnecessary.
And that Naomi piece, her maturity is showing on the court so well. I mean, even since the Australian Open, I mean, she is grinding out points. She wasn't giving Serena much of anything in that second set that I saw. And so maybe that was another reason that Serena felt like she had to do more.
On to Venus.
On to Venus, who has caused me to drink more this year and the last year than I have in quite a while.
Were you not following Venus between 2011 and 2015?
Oh, mercy. Well, Venus wound up playing this match, and her first match, she played a young up-and-coming person, and I can't remember who it was exactly, but she wound up grinding it out and playing well. And that next match was against Burton's. She was up 5-love in the first set. We were taking selfies in the stadium, kind of like grinning, thinking this is weird that Venus is up 5-love in any match.
When you get to that point in a Venus match, you know some horrible shit is around the corner. It never goes smoothly. I was at work and I followed that match from the app throughout the entire 3 sets. And when it was over is when I got to the car at the end of my shift, and I could not believe it. Like, I saw 5-love, and then I saw 5-7, and even having gone through all those years of those matches with Venus, this was a step too far. Almost. It's like I thought we had moved past this, you know?
Right. So she was up that much, and then she started coming back, and then she was down 4-1 in the third. And so I pretty much said, here we go again, another 3-set match with Venus, where she gets us to 3 sets because she fights like hell all the time. And we're not going to win this shit. And then she fights back. I think she was down, like I said, 4-1, and she rolled off the next 6 games and won 6 out of 7.
Yeah.
Yep, and won 7-5 in the third. And
saving match points.
Saving 3 or 4 match points.
I think it was 3.
3 match points. And after that, being in the sun all day watching Venus for that long, I went straight to the Moet tent after that and spent like $150 on Moet. And I was already lightheaded.
How much champagne does that get you? $150.
I honestly, it's like 2 bottles. I think it was 2 bottles of champagne.
Okay.
So
that you drank by yourself?
Maybe. There were other people in the booth. I mean, I'm not sure if they drank out of my bottle, but no, Venus did that. And then to follow that up, she came out and played Kanta the day or 2 later. And she lost the first set to Kanta, had a set point in the first set, took it to 3, and those second and third sets played some of the best tennis I've seen her play in a while against Kanta.
For as much as Kanta has given Venus problems in the past, she seems to match up well with Venus in terms of giving her a look that she likes to play. You know, Venus likes a more flat ball with more pace on it. And if Venus is able to get herself into the match, like that's a comfort zone in a sense for Venus. But it can go the other way. You know, it's like you just never know how it's going to play out between those two.
So what did you think about her match that she went out against Danielle Collins, who has had an amazing first half of this year, or first 3 months of this year?
In Venus's own words, she said, I just didn't have it tonight. You know, I'm one to try and move past Venus's age at this point and look at her results outside of the context of her age, but it'd be silly to not include that in part of the discussion, right? Because she had made the semis in Indian Wells, and then again here, you know, she's back in the quarterfinals in Miami, and it's a tough stretch for her.
So she basically defended the same amount of points that, you know, from the last year of Indian Wells in Miami.
Yeah, it flipped, right?
So it's pretty good for her. She's still not stuck at, but still is at number 8. What do you see for her as far as the clay court season comes?
I see nothing for Venus.
Like I haven't
had any expectations for Venus on clay in years. You know, anything that she does on clay is a bonus as far as I'm concerned. She's had great results. If you want to consider 4th rounds at a Grand Slam, great results in the last couple of years. If you look at the history of her career, you know, outside of making the final and losing to Serena and a couple other late runs, it's not been her forte. Are you saying you're holding out hope that Venus is going to make the quarters or semis of the French Open?
I'd say Venus, as long as she doesn't run into Maya
fair enough.
in the French, and maybe one of the pushers, like Svitolina, Kasatkina, Halep. I can see Venus making a run.
That is a very large grouping of...
It's almost, and add Sloane to the mix.
Are you trying to get us killed on this podcast?
It's only 7 of them. It's only 7 Sloane Ragers. I mean,
my God.
It's only 7 of them. So, but they're all good people.
This pushing business, y'all are, and James as well, I include him in this grouping, y'all are just salty. You know, when one of your faves gets beaten by somebody who isn't playing all-out aggressive tennis all the time, the defense is something to behold. And quite frankly, nobody plays defense better than Sloane Stephens when she's on song. We've seen that.
Yes.
Not saying I've forgiven her for the US Open semifinal. That will never happen. I still have nightmares with that backhand down the line pass. But she's shown that she can do pretty much anything on the tennis court. She may not do the things that you want to see her do.
Go away. No, I mean, just to throw it out there to the listeners, my first fave was Arantxa Sanchez Vicario.
As was mine.
So if we want to look at pushers and defensive players, I have nothing but admiration for defense. And Sloane is one of the best out there as far as defense goes, and she can clock that forehand at times too. She just doesn't have to a lot of times. She didn't have to against Ostapenko. She didn't have to really for most of the part against Venus until she got to that 30-all point in that semifinal. So,
and you can make the argument that playing somebody like Venus, and especially Ostapenko, if you play aggressively and give them that aggressive ball, you're playing into their hands. Right? So strategy is a part of the game.
So back to Venus and the French, or Venus and the clay. If she can stay away from those folks in the draw, I can see her, going to the round of 16, the quarterfinals. And I think she signed up for Madrid, Rome, and the French.
Madrid and Rome?
Yep. She and Serena both have signed up for those 3 tournaments.
Normally Venus only does Rome, right?
Yep. Was told in Miami that both of them have signed up for those 3 tournaments. So we'll see if she keeps that schedule, because they, of course, can change it, either one. So
now, onto the women's side, later on in the tournament, the finals, what do we make of Ostapenko's run?
Sort of like I did at the French. I mean, where did she come from? I mean, she has not had that type of year where you were expecting this, but then it wasn't totally out of the blue either, because that she just sort of peaks at certain times.
I mean, we're reminded of the quality of her game.
Right.
We're reminded of the huge deficiencies in her game.
Right.
Being the serve. The thing that I enjoy most about watching her is she has this moxie and confidence, kind of a brashness that you just don't see from many players in tennis. And I like that she's balancing it more now with more gracious runner-up speeches.
Right.
Because if we compare the Miami runner-up speech to her Charleston runner-up speech last year, oh my God. She managed to actually congratulate Sloane on her win.
Right.
Which is a step in the right direction.
Right. Growth.
Yeah, I mean, and she is young enough to work on those deficiencies in her game. Do you not want to talk about Sloane?
Do we want to talk about Sloane?
She's 6-0 in finals now in her career, which is pretty amazing. Let's be real. She's got a U.S. Open. She's got a Premier Mandatory title now. 6-0 in finals. She's building that resume.
She definitely is, and she's
up to number 9 in the world, cracked the top 10 for the first time. You're about to come bust.
Do I get money for this? I mean, I'm sitting here listening to all of these accolades about Sloane, and honestly, I am a Sloane fan. I have always liked Sloane. I've been rooting for Sloane since 2014, 2015. It is tough to get past the Venus beating at the U.S. Open, because Venus, it was just one more thing from last year that drove us all mad.
I was saying this to Dan last night. The thing about that semifinal that really irked me was Venus. Yes, she had all these chances last year. Australian Open, she lost to Serena. Okay, we've seen that many times before. It's to be expected, in a sense. She gets to Wimbledon. She gets a zoned in Muguruza. Tough luck again. You get to the U.S. Open and you got Sloane Stephens, and you have her in the 3rd set, and you think you have her in the 3rd set, and she's, in a sense, rope-a-doping you, and then she gets to the final where, had Venus gotten to that final, would she have gotten the same Madison Keys that Sloane got? Like that, even though it was just a semifinal, that was the tournament that could have been number 50, that could have been number 8. That's the one that got away as far as I'm concerned.
To me, that's the most difficult one last year. I think that if Venus would have just kept her foot on the gas pedal after, I think she won the 2nd set 6-love, and then comes out immediately in that 3rd set and loses serve. And then even has Sloane, like love 40 on Sloane serve. I mean, has Sloane on the ropes and let Sloane back into almost every game. So it shouldn't have come down to that 30-all point or that 30-all game, but it did. But that's not to say Sloane didn't earn it.
But she definitely did. She took that moment.
And Sloane, after losing all these matches, showed more in her game to come back, mental fortitude to come back after losing those 8 matches in a row and kind of being dragged on Twitter, being dragged in social media, to come back in Miami and to play really well like this and to win that title. Shows that she has something down deep, and she and Kamau have done really well to kind of get to this point.
Let's finish this segment with a shout out to John Isner. Are we shouting out John Isner? No, we are not.
Never.
We are mentioning that John Isner is the Miami Open champion.
Yes. Then we will mention that. And that's it. I'm not a Zverev fan. I'm not an Isner fan. So this tournament sort of ended in the men for me in the semis or maybe in the quarters. But
In the quarters when Chorich lost?
yeah, Chorich he's really grown.
Yes, that's one way to describe it.
He's top 10, so congratulations. Didn't he get into the top 10?
Chorich, no.
No. Where is he? He is in top 10. Where is he?
No, he's not top 10.
20?
Somebody else got into the top 10. It wasn't Chorich, though.
Oh, we can scrap that point, too.
But Chorich, he kind of felt like he was one of those next-gen players who was lost for a while. He was one of the first ones to come on the scene and then kind of went away. He's had big wins before. He's beaten Nadal. I watched him beat Nadal in Cincinnati. Mind you, it was a hobbled Nadal. But he's back, making back-to-back Masters 1000 quarterfinals.
And I think to give him a little credit for Federer losing to Delpo, he gave Federer one hell of a match, I think, in the semis in Indian Wells.
Mm-hmm.
So he's had 2 great tournaments back to back. It's good to see him. I saw him play against Kokonakis, and he played really well there too. So
I don't really have anything else to say about the men's side.
no, not at all.
We're here in Charleston. The Body Serve will be coming to you much more frequently in the next week than we normally do. So look out for that. Thank you to Chad for joining us in the car again.
All right.
Previously in Cincinnati, now in Charleston.
I love it. It's been great, guys.
So I'm going to sign off for this episode. It's going to be a little bit different. There's no James to sign off this time. You can follow me on Twitter at tennis_John. James is at ElliotJMR, 2 L's, 2 T's. And Chad, you are?
I am CC Smooth 13, which I am under some kind of mute,
Your Twitter account is under duress right now.
and I don't quite understand it, but hopefully it'll be resolved soon. So follow me at CC Smooth 13 on Twitter and CC Snaps 13 on Instagram.
And you can find The Body Serve on Twitter at The Body Serve, on Instagram as well at the same handle. Till next time.